receiving a lot of questions and comments on this EV journey on social media. So we did say one of our objectives is to look at debunking the myths. And we've got a whole lot of questions that have come through. So out there, thank you guys for the questions. Cool. So guys, and this is I think maybe a little bit tricky one. Who would like to take this one? Electric vehicles aren't better for the planet unless the power source is renewable.
So when we look at South Africa's decarbonization of fuels, if we move from our current fuel quality to Euro 6, it's only a 14% saving on greenhouse gas emissions. If we use EVs through our current grid, it's 34% saving. And if we use renewables, it's 68% saving on greenhouse gas emissions.
Perfect. Good answer. Thank you. Cool. Next one. And Dex, I think we just had this discussion. Electric vehicles have poor resale value. Is that a myth?
True. That's true. I've personally had a very hard experience in which, within 1 year, I've got told that the vehicle's value got reduced by a third of the price. So from that perspective, that's the truth. And I think it's something that just the industry needs to address in order to instill confidence into the consumer. So that's without a doubt. There's a big gap there that needs to be bridged.
Okay, great. Next one. Celia, I think this can be for you. Electric vehicles are more costly to import due to higher taxes that they attract.
So the truth is that all cars are imported at the same rate. But what creates a difference with EVs is that our trade with Europe has a bilateral that allows us to import ICE at 18%. But that provision of 18% does not cross over to NEVs. So we still importing NEVs into South Africa at the standard 25%, which makes them at least that 7% more expensive. But if you were to look at it across the globe, all other countries but Europe, we are importing at the same rate of 25. So, but it's because of our special relationship with Europe, where we export to that market 60% of what we produce, that relationship dynamic can be corrected. So there is a tool that we could use within our trade agreements to get the same 18% recognition for all our EV imports from Europe. And in the short term, EVs from Europe should be cheaper, and that challenge would be overcame. But then for other regions, we still have to figure out other trade agreements.
And then perhaps you're not paying carbon tax on these EVs, so implications.
So let me maybe touch on the carbon tax part. South African carbon tax rate is most likely the lower end, if not some of the lowest in the world. And just to give you an example, our carbon tax rate today is 1/10 of what Northern Europe pays. 1/10. And that's just the carbon tax that's been set. Now, what actually is applied as carbon tax is quite literally about 50% of what we set because of all the allowances that are given. So just as an example, if there's per ton, there's 100 Rand that's been set as the carbon tax. Because of all the allowances that's been given, we literally only end up paying 50 Rand to the ton, which is significantly lower than pretty much any geography. So from that perspective, and if you look at the totality of the pie of how much a vehicle costs, the carbon tax rate is a drop in the bucket compared to the taxes.
It's definitely not a disincentive.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Yeah, and I think you need to also mention the ad valorem,
The valorem issue, yeah.
which is a bigger issue, given we tax.
When last was that reviewed, Nathan?
And that's also another thing, yeah.
1995.
Yeah, but just to answer the question that Nathan is answering. So imagine a time when if you had bought something, say for 300,000, it would have been regarded as a non-luxury item. But then it would have been regarded as an entry-level luxury item. And 10 years down the line, what you would have bought for 300,000, you're now buying for 3 million because of inflation. But that entry level is still 300,000. And so now a car like a Suzuki Swift now attracts additional taxes because it's viewed as a luxury product. But nobody driving a Suzuki views Suzuki as a luxury product. And so if that inflationary adjustment was done with over time, the 3 million car would still be attracting the same ad valorem as it would have, as if it was still 300,000 10 years ago. And so, but you have to also agree that we live in a country where there's fiscal pressure and government wants to raise funding. And ad valorem tax seems to be a very easy mechanism for them to raise that fiscal revenue. And so to tell government that they can forfeit certain revenue that already they can project and they can bank on requires that we do a better selling as industry around what the adjustment should look like. And that empirical evidence, I don't think anyone has researched to justify that if you reduce ad valorem from a product, they can recover it on the bedside because demand will go up. And I guess you cannot necessarily create that certainty that VAT is guaranteed and demand will go up. So government has been very, very uneager to move from that position.
Cool, thanks guys. Next question. Electric vehicles cannot reach speeds that fuel-powered vehicles can. Froze, would you like to take that one?
First-hand experience.
How long is the piece of string, right? Certainly they can reach those speeds, and I think some of the vehicles that we've seen on this strip can reach the speeds faster than traditional internal combustion engine vehicles can. So yeah, I think that's a myth.
Cool. Nick, electric vehicles are only for urban areas and not long distance travel.
No, they're definitely for everyone. I think there's challenges when you're on cities and when you're in rural areas to have electric vehicles, but they actually have been proven actually that you can have an electric vehicle with rural urban areas. So UK, our problem is about not having off-street parking. So people in UK actually can't charge their vehicle on their own driveways, so they can only charge on the street. That's our biggest problem. But rural areas having off-street parking, it can be a little bit easier to maybe. So I haven't really seen any significant differences about owning an EV in rural areas or within urban areas.
Excellent, thanks. I'm gonna go to Hiten now. Is it true you can't modify an electric vehicle?
You certainly can. It's no different to any combustion engine, and it's even more easier with an EV because it has more software, and that's
Okay.
possible. So the same tuning that can be done can certainly be done, even a lot more easier. You've got less parts on compared to a combustion car, so it's actually cheaper, and you can have incredible performance from it.
Hiten, can you release performance upgrades through software in an EV?
Can you release a performance update on an EV via software? And the answer is yes, you can.
Thank you. That's great.
Cool. Then I'm gonna stick to you on this one. Electric vehicles are not built for drifting or spinning tires. The people want to know.
Actually, Keval, we're going to direct that question to you.
We enjoyed the time on the track, and yes to both. They can be done.
There we go. The man spits the truth.
Nathan, I think our trip up Swartberg Pass today, EVs don't perform well in mountainous regions.
Oh no, that's not true. Obviously, an EV that's an SUV performs the same as an EV as an SUV that's a petrol. We took the BYD, which is essentially a saloon type car, up the mountain and down again, and performed really well, like any other similar car. So it's really about the physical characteristics of the car, height of the car, etc. So it's not really a petrol versus EV question. It's really about how a car is designed. Is a car designed for off-road or not? Yeah.
Okay, cool. Electric vehicle batteries are difficult to replace and quite costly. Greg.
I think that's a myth. What we're seeing is the data showing that batteries in electric vehicles are actually lasting well over 12, 13, 14 years in some instances, and reporting states of health of still over 90%. And that's got to do with
everything to do with the way that the car's been looked after, the charging behavior of the vehicle, and the battery being looked after, which talks back to the resale value, that when the data starts to prove it, that the state of health of the battery could actually create an improved value for the vehicle over time. So it's an absolute myth that these batteries need to be replaced or they're piling up on landfills. There's going to be second life purposes for these batteries. There's going to be a recycling value chain behind these batteries. There's going to be a whole shift to urban mining as well, which means reclaiming the minerals out of used batteries and making new batteries with the same minerals as well. So it's definitely a circular economy in the making.
Excellent. And some good news there, I suppose, for a lot of those sustainability roles out there. Next question, Sedley, I'm going to come to you. If something breaks in an electric vehicle, you can't repair the vehicle yourself.
So I'm gonna defer that to him.
So I think there's certainly less moving parts in the car. The chance of anything going faulty is just diagnostics by computer and software update from that in most cases. We're already seeing that in terms of the early vehicles that have come in and challenges with the software. The update on that resolves it.
So on a regulatory point of view though, just so that I bring color, the aftermarket guidelines have been updated, published in September this year. But what that would do is that if we go by them, an independent service provider can also be accredited to have access to the software of the vehicle for upgrades and so forth. And so it does create as well more specialized tuning. But again, the mechanic is not a grease guy. He's now a technician who's very IT wise. And so we're looking at a different type of specialist working on these cars rather than traditional guy.
Okay, cool. Cool, thanks. Nathan, I'm going to come to you on this one. You can't tow an electric vehicle, you have to use a flatbed.
Who's asking this question?
I'm not making this up.
Yeah, so I think, that's correct. You need a flatbed truck for an electric vehicle in case it's run out of charge and you can't make a plan B, A, B, or C doesn't work, then it's your last resort. So definitely you have to use a flatbed. But similar to any other heavy car like a Land Rover, Jaguar, etc., all those cars also require flatbeds as well. So it's more about the weight of the car as opposed to anything else as well. Yeah.
And while we're on that point, another question, I tried to keep some similar themes here. Can you jumpstart an electric vehicle?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. Maybe Hitton or Greg.
Well, you can jumpstart your house from an electric vehicle through vehicle to grid or vehicle to home. So it's a misnomer that you need to jumpstart the vehicle. It's the other way around.
But before an EV starts up, you've got a traditional 12-volt battery.
Yes.
And if that is not working, you then jumpstart that to start the car. So yes, you can jumpstart an EV to get powered up.
Interesting. Okay, great. Dex, electric vehicle charging stations at home increase the costs as you need to purchase and install a charger and may increase your electricity bill if you don't utilize solar power.
So at this stage, I don't think there's an increase in cost from an installation perspective because most of the OEMs that I know of, and again, I stand to be corrected, but as far as I know, they provide free AC chargers for a start. They cover the cost of the installation too. So the moment you get a vehicle, there isn't necessarily any additional cost associated with that. Sure, if it breaks, there might be maintenance related costs which might tie into it. So there's a bit of that. In regards to electricity though, I think you've got to weigh it against how much you're typically paying for petrol, diesel. And I think that's the way that I look at it because I used to drive an ICE. My monthly bill used to float anywhere between 4,000 to 5,000 rand a month. I got a solar system at home, so it provides a little bit of supplemental, but I still pull from Eskom because there's a significant need from an EV perspective. And My electricity bill went up by, if I look purely at just that, maybe about 1,000 rand at the most. But so if I compare the 4,000 to 5,000 rand versus 1,000 rand, I'm actually 1/5 the cost from a energy input perspective or fueling perspective. So in totality, I'm actually still saving on a monthly basis from an operating cost side. So I don't think you should purely just be looking at it as your Eskom charges are increasing, but you got to look at it and what is the trade-off that you're seeing from having a traditional vehicle versus electric.
But savings definitely coming through from not filling fuel at the petrol station.
No doubt.
A lot of people who have a point, so they come to me as well, EVs are more expensive, and they do it by comparing the electricity bill before the EV and after, and they say, yeah, it's gone up, it's gone by 10, 20%, it's more expensive. You say, yes, it's gone up, but have you thought about the money you're saving about you're not filling up your petrol diesel vehicle? Because that's not a bill that comes in every month, right? You're only aware of that when you spend the money, and that's when you'll see the savings, because you don't have petrol diesel bills anymore because you're not going to the petrol stations anymore. But people naturally don't think in that way. They have like a known bill, they see it gone up, and then they think it's more expensive.
Okay, great. Guys, can we charge our EV vehicles in rain or bad weather?
Oh, let me answer that one. So I was in the middle of KwaZulu-Natal. Yeah, I think you know because I've actually posted it on LinkedIn. It was stormy, as in I'm talking not rain coming vertically down, I'm talking in a 45-degree angle. And it was actually my first long distance trip after I bought my EV. And it was 9-10 o'clock at night. And I went to the charger. I had to charge, otherwise I couldn't get back to Johannesburg. And I looked at the charging and thinking to myself, this is rated for 150 kilowatts. What would happen if I do try to charge? Would I get shot? But I didn't have a choice. So I actually went to the car, I plugged it in, and I'm still here. Now, let's just give you a bit more details. The way that charging plugs works is that the moment you hold it in your hand, the entire current that's rated for doesn't run through the gun. The moment you plug the gun into an electric vehicle, it runs a very, very low current through it to start the handshaking process between the vehicle and the gun. So I'm talking like one-digit volts. As in, you could hold that wire and you, if you're lucky, you might feel something in your skin. That's the level of current that runs through it. And then once it establishes it, it actually takes up the current in stages. So what it basically means is the moment the connection takes place and you've got that seal in, unless something very bad happens, the chance of you actually being electrocuted, and I'm talking about a person who's standing in the middle of a storm and getting electrocuted, it's very slow. Because I think just the way that these standards have been built, and they've taken into account some of the water-related challenges that lie with electricity. So the summarized version of that answer is you will most likely never be electrocuted due to trying to charge your car.
Can I interject as well? As an expert, someone who's lived in a very rainy country, the simple answer is no, there's no injury about you charging. I will know that very, very, very firmly.
Excellently, thanks. Feroz, what is the difference between an NEV and a BEV?
So this is something I learned while running with the tent. So I'm no way an expert on this, but the way I understand it is BEVs are battery electric vehicles, so what we know as electric vehicles. And NEV, actually the E doesn't stand for electric but energy, it stands for new energy vehicles. So I learned that.
Yeah.
Am I right?
You are right.
There we go. So I'm assuming that means, or my understanding it means, it doesn't only apply to BEVs, but any alternate type of energy generation system.
Plug-in hybrid, would that qualify as an NEV?
Yeah. So it's a variety of. Yeah.
So I think the best way to look at it is that we're looking at your tailpipe and the amount of carbon of nozzles that it emits. Yeah. So we have two type of zero emission vehicles. So vehicles that will not give you any carbons out of the exhaust because they've got pure energy. Battery electric is one, and the other one is dual cell energy vehicles, which use your hydrogen vehicle car, and those will give you zero carbons out of the tailpipe. But to earlier point that he mentioned earlier is that there are those that are purists that will say your tailpipe should be zero, and there are those that will say, look, it's incremental, you can't get to zero overnight. And so in your journey towards zero, how then do we begin to reduce emissions? And your plug-in hybrid and the sort of those stepping stones towards that net zero the eventual end. Plug-in hybrids and traditional hybrids are sort of your technologies towards that end. I nearly use the word transitional technologies because historically that's what we used to do, but I'm not allowed to do so anymore. If that makes sense.
They're all parallel, aren't they? They're
Yeah,
all
they are.
moving at different speeds. It's multi-speed transition these days. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Last question. This is the
we
last
are,
question.
yeah, I was about to say we are reaching the end. There are two more questions. What policies are required from government to increase adoption?
Me. Yeah. I mean, look, the government has its existing playbook, but I think that what's missing is the sort of lens where you should actually look at EVs or NEVs from a segmentation perspective, because what we are doing now, we're testing cars that are sold in the consumer market. And so that is private individuals, might be fleets, etc. But there are other transport modes. For example, there's public transport. You have buses, you have taxis. There's the delivery of goods and logistics. And there you have anything from long-haul logistic trucks to urban logistics to last-mile logistics, which is like two-wheelers, three-wheelers, even four-wheelers. You have other applications, for example, in mining. The mining industry is under massive pressure to decarbonize, and they're already going ahead with that. So, and in mining sector, you have a suite of vehicles, anything from a four-wheel bucky to a vehicle that needs to go underground to a large dump truck. So there are various other segmentations that are driven by things like ESG, shareholder value, the green economy, where you could actually provide additional incentives, partner with private sector players and private capital to accelerate the decarbonization of logistics in those specific demand pathways. And with that, you'd have then investment in infrastructure, and then you start creating some critical mass in those in those segments. And in some of those areas, you can actually create critical mass. If you look at public transport and buses, and what Golden Arrow, for example, in Cape Town is doing, and we've already piloted the buses in South Africa, built them, we have the data. There's just been recently an EV taxi being launched at the Smart Mobility Africa Summit. So there are various segments where you can target specific policies to accelerate adoption. The retail space is really exciting given the boom of e-commerce. Post the pandemic, more people are shopping online. There are more bikes on the road delivering things from the various retailers. I mean, I'm hearing about like 30,000 bikes being sold in South Africa a year. We used to be a bike market that's less than 5,000 a year.
Yeah.
So just think about that multiple and what we're seeing on the roads. And all of those vehicles can be decarbonized. So you provide little incremental incentives in all of those areas, then you can increase adoption as well. And potentially there will be spillover effects.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I think some very insightful questions and great responses by the panel. So keep the questions coming, and thanks, guys.
Thanks very much. Thank you.